What's going on, everybody? It is Tuesday morning. That means it's time for that effing morning after show. It's the last one before the Super Bowl. We got lots of stats to bring you. We got lots of things to talk about. We want to know what you guys think the entire show, so let us know. Let's get this thing started. Here we go. Boom, wardrobe change, just like that. Let's bring in the man, the myth, the legend, NFL writer at sportskita.com. Joins us every week. Adam Hulse Sports, Mr. Adam Hulse. Let's bring him in. There he is. Bring him in. Adam, welcome. It is Super Bowl week. I'm going to say it. I don't care. If the NFL's watching, they can find me. I'm going to be saying Super Bowl. You'll see it all week long on my channel because damn it, that's what it is. But we can call it the NFL championship if you want to. We can call it the big game, whatever you want to call it. We got a good one on tap this year, I think.
Yeah, it's funny, like there's a lot of sites and, even advertisements that work their way around that or even work their way around team names sometimes. Like you can say the two cities, Kansas City against San Francisco, that's not trademarked. Yeah, so that's an interesting little thing. But look, Super Bowl week, I hate the week off in between. Look, I understand it, all the media stuff, all the hype, all the build-up, all the stuff you want to do around the Super Bowl. I understand it. But 2 weeks to build up one game for me is too long. Let's get it over with. Like, by the time the game gets here in another 5 days, I'm like, let's just get this dang thing over with already.
Yeah, I know. I'd like to think that originally it started so the teams had a little more time to prepare for each other because they're not teams that, back then would have seen each other all season. Now it's a possibility. But, you're right. It's all about the money. It's all about the media. It's all about the hype train and how can we make more dollars. Let's give us an extra week to do that. Because the players really don't get a lot of practice time. They're too busy on Radio Row and doing all that stuff. Speaking of which, I got a big announcement, and I want to do it real quick before we get too far into it because it's important. If you guys didn't know, we kind of alluded to this. We are now That Sports Podcast Network, Fantasy Sports Corporation, now That Sports Podcast Network. Why is that important to you right now? Because down in Vegas, we have Nikki and Deb from the Blonde Blitz. They are going to be doing Las Vegas Super Bowl rolls, Super Bowl events, Super Bowls, all the stuff going on in Las Vegas. I mean, they're going to the parties, not like they're going to the parties, the events. They're meeting the people. You're going to want to catch it all on That Sports Podcast Network. And the reason I bring that up because I want you to be able to find it. If you look for that Fantasy Sports Core, you may not find it. You'll find Instagram, stuff like that. But the YouTube channel is now That Sports Podcast Network. You're going to want to catch Nikki and Deb down there at the Super Bowl, giving you all the coverage you want on the network. So go check that out. Okay, enough of the ads, Adam. They're important, but what's really important is this game that we have coming up. Before we get started, is there anything that you want to talk about before we start diving into this?
I mean, let's just get into it.
Let's go.
Let's just get into it. It's Super Bowl. There's one more game. Let's get through it and get to the offseason.
I love it. We got to talk about what we did in the offseason because we're going to do it again next offseason, God willing. We went through every team. We went through every record, every game. We decided who was going to be where, who was going to finish strong. We had these guys there at the end. I don't know if we had them in the Super Bowl, but there you go. That's our record. We did pretty damn good, and we like to talk about it every gosh darn week. So now we talked about how the pass is kind of downplayed a little bit over the course of the playoffs. We've talked about how the run has stayed consistent. Teams are still running the football. Teams want to run the football. We're going to see how that works when we get into the numbers and the stats coming up here for Super Bowl Sunday. It does make a difference, I tell you, but game plans can change. We'll talk about all that. So let's get into some of the facts for Super Bowl week. The Patriots were the last back-to-back Super Bowl winners. They did it in 03-04, so Kansas City's trying to be the first team in 10 years, roughly, 9 years technically. I guess it is 10 years. 10 years to go back-to-back. So, put that where you want to on your odds sheet. Mahomes is the first QB under 30 to start 4 Super Bowls. That's pretty amazing. He wouldn't be the first one to win 3 under 30, but he'd be one of 3 if that happened. We don't lean too far forward into that. 49ers have a top 5 scoring offense and yardage. So don't think that can't, we're going to see how even these teams are going through it. Andy Reid, 258 wins, 4th all-time, 25 playoff wins, 2nd all-time. Adam, if you're listening, who is 1st all-time in playoff wins?
That would be Bill Belichick.
Absolutely. See, this is why we have Adam Hulse. He had no clue that question was coming. I can do it to him all day long, and he'll pop it out because he's an NFL writer at Sportskeeda. Did you guys know that? You probably did. That was kind of an easy one. CMC and Terrell Davis, the great Terrell Davis, are the only 2 running backs to average 110 scrimmage yards per game in the regular season and the postseason. Both those guys did it. Hey, guess what? CMC is actually going to be in the Super Bowl. Weird why I brought that up. Pacheco was selected 251st overall. Purdy was 262nd. This is maybe one of my favorite stats because we hear all about Mr. Irrelevant and Purdy and how great he is and stuff like that. And he is. He's phenomenal. I'm not taking anything away. I'm not trying to make that argument. What I want you to remember is how late Pacheco was taken too. Did you know that? Have you been writing about that, Adam?
Well, yeah, I mean, and with running backs, it's a little bit different, right? Like, you can find good running backs, outside in the later rounds of the draft sometimes. I mean, 251 is very late. Like, that's definitely a good point. With the quarterbacks, and it's something we've touched on before, when you really run through the 32 teams in the NFL and who their starting quarterback is, the majority of those quarterbacks are first-round picks. Brock Purdy is an exception to that. Dak Prescott is an exception to that. Yeah. Most of the time, your starting quarterbacks, and especially your good starting quarterbacks, they're first-round picks.
Now, see, there's where you split it up. People are like, no, wait, Russ Wilson. No, wait, what about? He said good quarterbacks. He said guys are performing. Russ Wilson was good. I don't want to take away from what Russ did, but I think you'd get an argument about him being a good quarterback. We can throw stats at you, though, and I will in the offseason. His stats really weren't as bad as people like to let off, but you don't get the W's. No one cares. Both teams are a combined 5-0 in the Las Vegas Stadium. It's got to give. That's why I saw the headline where I got this stat from his article that I read. Both teams are 5-0 in Allegiant Stadium since 2020 when it opened. Someone is taking their first loss this year. What do you think about that one, Adam? I think that one's kind of fun.
That's a really interesting stat. I did know that Mahomes was undefeated in Allegiant Stadium because, he has an incredible record against all of the division opponents in general. I forget exactly what his division record was. I actually wrote something on it the other day. But yeah, in doing that research, I did find out that he hasn't lost a game in that stadium since it opened.
Yeah, it was pretty. I saw that. I was like, oh, you know what? I went back, checked it out. Sure enough, there you go. But I thought that was kind of cool. That was kind of a fun one. All right. So here we go. We talked about the change to that sports network. Don't forget to catch us Super Bowl Sunday morning. We're running all morning long. You see it 9 to 12, 3 hours. We're gonna have all kinds of segments. We've got KC Superfans. Really cool segment on the Superfan, by the way. Superfan is a legit thing. Like, it's not just something people call themselves. It's something that people actually do. They have to sign up for, meet criteria, and do all this stuff to be a Superfan. But anyway, we've got some cool Superfan segments from Kansas City and San Francisco. We've got a nice cooking segment that you're not going to want to miss. Some ribs and some chicken from a guy who is in a very elite club with presidents and just famous athletes. You'll see it all played out. We got possibly some games going on. We got some prizes, definitely, things like that. So catch us on the Big Game Special, That Sports Network, Super Bowl morning, 9 to 12, before you really start getting into it. That's where you're going to want to be. Okay, San Francisco, Kansas City. We talked about this one last week. For the season, Purdy's QB6, Mahomes is QB8. There's the stats. Yardage is pretty close. Touchdowns, pretty close. The rushing, obviously, Mahomes runs a little bit more. He's a little more effective at it, but Purdy's got the rushing touchdowns. Turnovers, 11 to 14, respectable in the league the way it is now. Again, you guys know I don't put a lot of stock in turnovers as far as interceptions go. Interceptions means you're trying. It just matters when you make those interceptions. So We talked about the air yards, which is really interesting, and we've been beaten to death with Brock Purdy, and I love it. We should be beaten to death with Brock Purdy because people need to understand why they should be giving him the respect. Yes, he was second in air yards, whereas Patrick Mahomes was last in air yards. You can flop that around to all the places where Mahomes is first as well. But I want to get into the yardage per game because that is an important stat for the Super Bowl. You're going to have prop bets. You're going to have a lot of money flying around off these stats. And that's really kind of where we want to focus on. We're going to focus on the Super Bowl stats. We want Super Bowl stats that make you money this week as well. So 300-yard games. Purdy actually has more. He's got 5 versus 3 on the season. Minus 250 games. Mahomes has more, but both of them have a lot of games where they didn't even go 250 yards. You think about Kansas City's wide receiver room, Adam, and the quote-unquote problems that they had, even though, especially towards the end, they started putting up great numbers. But for both these guys to be minus 250 in a league where the pass is the dominant thing, what do you think? What's your feeling on that as far as the Super Bowl coming up? I mean, I think this is kind of a telltale sign of what we're about to see.
Look, I mean, we know San Francisco loves to run the ball. Kyle Shanahan's always loved to run the ball, even prior to CMC, back when it was Eli Mitchell or Raheem Mostert or, whatever running back. Kyle Shanahan loves to run the ball. It is interesting to see that with the Chiefs, though, but it's something we've talked about all year. This is not the same Mahomes Chiefs that we're used to. This is not the high-flying, deep passing, run-up-the-score Chiefs that we've seen in years past. This is more of a conservative approach because Patrick Mahomes does not trust his wide receivers. Outside of Rashee Rice and, of course, Travis Kelce, he does not trust the rest of those pass catchers. And I think that was even more so when he lost Jerick McKinnon because that is a guy that he does trust. And his safety valve on a lot of plays when Kelce isn't there. And I mentioned it last week. Like, if you really watch the Chiefs play this year, the offense kind of goes through Pacheco. They go through Pacheco, and if that's working, they stick with that as their bread and butter. Their bread and butter. And then they just let Mahomes make the big passes and the big plays when he has to, but they're not forcing those shots anymore like they have been in years past.
We're going to see in just a couple minutes, guys, when we break down the stats, we're going to break down offensive routes, completion percentages, that whole thing. We're going to show you the numbers, but we'll see how the different approach that both these teams take. And honestly, when you see that, why this minus 250 actually makes a little bit of sense and why it's worked for them. 2+ touchdowns. Purdy did it in 5 games. Mahomes actually only did it in 2. So, again, you talk about running through Mahomes. You talk about the diversity that Kansas City has had throughout the season. Plenty of games with 2 touchdowns, but more than 2 touchdowns. That's what you're looking at. Again, you would think, and these are numbers that you would think, if I asked you who had more 2+ touchdown games, I think 90% of people would say, oh, Mahomes. No, Purdy. Purdy's so underestimated in what he did. Only 3 games with more than 1 interception. Guys protect the ball. That's actually not a surprising stat to me for the fact in the sense that you got to protect the ball to get this far in the season. To make it to the Super Bowl, you got to protect the ball. This is the one, Adam, that I think is going to throw people off. In the playoffs, Purdy has 1 interception. Mahomes already has 4. But, don't get too crazy with it because he's in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely an interesting stat. And look, minus that little stretch in the middle of the season when Purdy had, I believe it was the 3-game losing streak where he threw like 5 interceptions or whatever it was. This guy's been very good at not turning the ball over. That little 3-game stretch was, prior to that, he hadn't thrown an interception in his entire career. Like, he was going on almost a full season's worth of games without throwing his first interception. And you're right, Purdy does get underrated. And it's unfair because he gets underrated because he has CMC and because he has all of those weapons around him. And it's just one of those things where, like, you can't win in this type of situation in terms of public opinion because if he's struggling and they didn't have good guys around him, they're like, oh, see, he has no help. He can't do it on his own, blah, blah, blah. Kind of the excuse for, like, Mahomes this year with his very weak receivers, right? Yeah. But then Purdy, you surround him with his juggernaut offense, and the knock is, well, anybody could play quarterback in that offense.
And that's the thing. I mean, you can't win for trying. You can't win for winning. honestly, because that's exactly what both these guys did. To include Purdy, these guys have the best records in the National Football League, especially when you talk about the 49ers there. The 49ers were one of the first teams to wrap this whole thing up. And, that's because of Brock Purdy. And I think what a lot of people also forget when they talk about Brock Purdy is you brought up that stretch where he had the interceptions. He had a couple games and then he got it back. He didn't let it define his season. He didn't let it bring him down. A lot of the guys in the locker room, you'll see a lot of interviews talk about Purdy and his routine, that he has a very set routine that he goes through and how important that is for players and quarterbacks in the NFL. And he relied on that routine. He relied on that team around him. And yeah, sure, he's got a fantastic team around him. But honestly, you're silly if you say that either of these teams don't have a fantastic team. Now, you can say one's stronger, one's weaker. You can say that there's other teams that have better receiving cores or weaker receiving cores, but clearly both these teams are fantastic or they wouldn't be here. And that's the thing, is these are great teams. The Super Bowl is not an individual event, although someone will get the MVP. This is a team event. And say what you want about Kansas City, and you can say that Brock Purdy's on a great team. He is, and that's why he got here. So is Kansas City. Mahomes may do a lot of the work, but without the team, Kansas City isn't here, Adam.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And like you look at both of these teams too, and it's the balance as well. You know what I mean? They both run the ball well. They both play defense well at times, though the 49ers defense has kind of fallen off in recent weeks with the extra week to prepare. Maybe they'll have a better game plan coming into the Super Bowl, especially against the Chiefs offense. That sure, they have Mahomes, but they pretty much struggled all season long, to really get any big offensive production rolling. So I think that the balance is very important too. They can win in a lot of different ways, both of these teams, and they've had to use that throughout the year to get to this point.
Yeah, let's talk about how they use that exactly. So, offensive route attempts, you see Kansas City, San Francisco there in the gold. And what you see, number one, what you have to understand, well, I'll go ahead and show it now. San Francisco was 32nd in pass attempts. They had the fewest pass attempts of any team in the entire NFL. So when you see their little gold bars being a little lower than the Kansas City bars, that's why. Kansas City was in the upper 10 for pass attempts. So let's just preface with that right there, why you see a difference in the size of bars. But what you see going across is that you see Kansas City likes to use the hitch, the flat, the screen. Both teams like to use the screen. When you look at the numbers, when you got a guy like Deebo Samuels on San Francisco's side, it's really not that surprising. But hitches, flats, and screens for Kansas City, both teams like the outs. San Francisco likes to go into the ins and the crosses. And the reason I point this out, San Francisco's strongest routes, the most used routes, are the outs, the cross, and the in, and the screen. The screen automatically, the guy with the ball doesn't have anybody on him until he starts getting outside. But the San Francisco likes to use the routes that get the receiver in front of the defender. So the only way, so what? Obviously, the way to defend this is with a zone defense, so that you have a defender there. But if you try to man up against these guys, that's when San Francisco likes to run these routes that automatically puts the receiver in front of the defender when they make that cut. And that allows Brock Purdy to complete a lot of passes. Whereas you see Mahomes, he likes to go on the run. He doesn't like to always sit in the pocket. He likes to make them quick and fast. And we'll see, short versus long routes coming up. But those hitches, those things down there in the flat, those screens, where he can be a part of that. You see the difference here, not just in the quarterback play, but how the coaches utilize their quarterbacks to get the ball downfield, Adam.
Yeah, and this also kind of plays into why Brock Purdy sometimes gets criticism, because a lot of what he does is by offensive design, right? And like people take credit away from Purdy because they say, it's Shanahan's offense and it's his system and blah, blah, blah. Well, look, I mean, if that was true, then how come the other quarterbacks in his system haven't looked as good as Purdy has looked, right? It's like Tua gets that same type of criticism with McDaniels. Like, oh, yeah, like anybody can just throw design dump-offs to Tyreek Hill,
No wonder Tua has the most yards in the league. He's got Tyreek Hill,
things too, right? Because then when these quarterbacks don't have a great coach, they blame the coach too for the quarterback being bad or by not being surrounded by good players or having awful play calling or this or that. So it's like you can never win with these things.
I remember in my youth, the late great John Madden, talking about Bill Parcells, and this was when Bill Parcells was still coaching, and he credited Parcells. He said, "What Parcells does, Parcells is a master at using what he has. So he gauges what he has. Bill Belichick does this exact same thing. He looks at his players, he figures out what the strengths are versus the weaknesses, and he sets up the offense, sets up the plays to operate to the player's strength. That's why you're always going to have this Brady versus Belichick debate, because Belichick was great at putting Brady in a situation that played to his strengths. And he did that with all his receivers. You look at Edelman, you look at all these guys that never did anything once they left New England. That's what great coaches do. These two coaches are no different. They have set up their game plans, especially when you talk about Andy Reid. They've set up their game plans to play to their player strengths. When we talk about the quarterback room, this is a perfect example. This illustrates it better, I think, than anything I've seen yet.
Yeah, and this, I mean, Andy Reid's kind of had a system for a very long time on the way that he designs his offense. I think what this season has shown me about Andy Reid is that he can do things differently, and he has designed a different offense this year, him and, Mahomes in conjunction, of course, that this isn't the same type of Andy Reid style that we saw with the Eagles, that we saw all these years with the Chiefs. He was able to adjust. And look, you hit it on the head with Parcells. It makes sense with Belichick. Obviously, Parcells was Belichick's mentor. Belichick pretty much learned all of his, styling and game planning from Bill Parcells. And when you look at all of those Patriots Super Bowl teams, a lot of them were run drastically different, especially on the offensive side of the ball. There was the year, when Randy Moss was there and Brady threw 50 touchdowns, and it was one of the best offensive teams of all time. But a lot of those other years, it was a lot of running. There was a lot of screens. There was a lot of checkdowns. There was just a lot of grinding on offense.
You see Belichick do that every week. He doesn't just gauge his own strengths and weaknesses. He looks at the other side of the ball. And obviously all coaches are doing that, but some people are just better at it. Some people have a game plan already in their head. We talk about, back in the day, you used to have the scripted plays. Everybody's talking about, this coach scripts his first 15 plays or scripts his first, and you had to get away from that because you have to be able to adjust. That's what these two guys have been able to do. And we can make the argument on Shanahan getting off of that during games, which is why he's, lost 2 Super Bowls by giving up huge leads. But to get there at this point, this is what we're looking at. This slide here, offensive route attempts by percentage. We see, again, the flat, the screen, and San Francisco is actually still very good. So they're the routes that they like to go with, the ins, the outs, the crosses, they obviously have a decent completion percentage with that. But look at San Francisco's corner route percentage, and they don't use it a lot. But if you look at their screen, their flat, and their hitch percentage, it's very high. They're very successful, even though that's not the most run route. When they do run it, they're still very successful. Obviously, Kansas City is successful or they wouldn't be here, okay? But you see Kansas City is successful in the things that they do. In the hitch, the flat, the screen, that's where their highest percentage is at. San Francisco is successful across the board because they utilize different routes and they do it at the right time. Again, playing to Purdy's strength, gauging the defense, what the defense is about to do. And so you see the percentages for Purdy be equal to or even better than Mahomes across the board. If you want to take this overall, you would say that Purdy's percentages are much better overall across these routes than Patrick Mahomes. And you could say, it's because Patrick Mahomes that you see down here, they don't hardly, less than 20%, just over 20% on 6 of the 10 routes. They're approaching 60 or higher on 4 of them. They predominantly use these 4 or 5 routes here. But San Francisco is the one with the percentage rate across the board. So percentages, I know they can be skewed, but I like to show those as well. You have anything to say before I move on from that, Adam?
Well, yeah, and it's I think important to remember too that San Francisco has been building this team for years to fit this Shanahan system of offense that he runs. That's why they targeted Deebo Samuel, right? And then they paired him with Brandon Ayuk, who is a completely different skill set than Debo Samuel is. And having George Kittle, and then obviously the big move to go get McCaffrey, like they didn't just grab any good type of players. They specifically drafted to fit the system that they want to run. And this is that system kind of peeking out the way that they built it. And, their window is obviously wide open right now because all those pieces that they added, their vision that they had years ago when they started this process, is basically completed.
Absolutely. Yeah. Here we are. Let's talk about the pass distribution. Okay, this is where the ball goes. I'll explain some of these a little bit as it goes. The first one, remember these when we get to the defensive ball. Kansas City scores the most in the second quarter. We know they scored the least in the fourth, but I put it up there anyway. They have scored the most points in the second quarter. San Francisco also scores the most in the second and the fourth quarters. We're going to the Super Bowl. If you got it, least for Kansas City, most for San Francisco. You might want to know that. Both teams like to throw the ball short. See, short left, short right are the predominant numbers there. We talked about San Francisco has the lowest amount of pass attempts in the entire NFL. Their most pass route is the least thrown route in the entire NFL. Out of all the teams in the NFL, they threw the least amount of passes to short left. Out of all 32 teams using short left, San Francisco threw it there the least amount of times. But for San Francisco, it was their most used route. So you see how it kind of fewest passes, most used route across the NFL. There you go. Whereas Mahomes, they like to go short left. They were second in the league for using that short left the most time. Still only a 40 pass differential. So, we're playing with numbers over the entire season. We're minimalist numbers, but there you go. Both like to go short middle. Both like to go short right. Both these teams like to throw short. They do throw deep, and we're going to see that in a second. They will throw deep, and what's even more interesting is when they throw deep and how successful they are at it. But you see deep when Kansas City goes deep, they like to go deep to the right, whereas San Francisco is kind of even across the board there on their deep routes. Underneath, Kansas City throws short, left to right, 3-2 over all the other passes on first down. So on first down, they absolutely like to go short left and short right. They have a 16 yards per pass average on the deep middle pass. That's supposed to be middle. Sorry about the typo. Middle passes on third down. Third down only. Everything else is actually really atrocious. They have horrible downfield averages. But on that deep middle pass on third down, they average 16 plus. So watch for them on third down to try and go deep middle. 70% completion rate on all short routes every down except mid. Every single down, they complete 70% of their short routes. Doesn't matter. First, second, third. That's how good Kansas City is passing. I'll do the San Francisco numbers in a second, but Adam, just with those right there, what do you see there? More of the same, I think.
In terms of the efficiency of Patrick Mahomes, and I'm sitting here kind of thinking about, like the opposite point of what I kind of just made with Purdy, how everyone's like, oh, like anybody could run that offense. Well, I'm going to say the counter thing about Patrick Mahomes. I don't think any other quarterback in the NFL would be at this point with the wide receivers that Patrick Mahomes has. That's just his greatness speaking right there, that you can pretty much surround him with any wide receivers. And as long as he has Kelsey, him and Reed are going to figure it out.
On the San Francisco side, this is interesting to me because of Kittle. So we saw throughout the season, Kittle gets used a lot. In the first playoff game, Kittle got used. The second one, he did not. He gets used as a pass blocker. And even when he gives his interviews now, he's talking about, they talk about what's his game plan, what's he going to do. He's saying block for McCaffrey, block for McCaffrey, block for McCaffrey. Obviously, I think he's going to get used a little bit more. But San Francisco has 8 yards and more average on first down. We talked about last week how Purdy likes to throw at the sticks. He only throws 0.8 yards in front of the first yardstick. He's trying to throw first down. Whereas Patrick Mahomes, I think, threw four yards in front of the stick. Lets his receivers, pass catchers, do most of the work. So Purdy's throwing those first downs. And to that credit, they're getting 8+ yards on first down when they throw short. Watch for that in the Super Bowl. And you notice they go left and right as well. 50% of their deep routes came on first down. 50% of the deep routes that they threw, they didn't throw a ton, but when they threw a deep route, over half of them came on first down. Both these teams actually do this with an 18-yard average. You saw Kansas City 16 yards, San Francisco's 18-yard average. Overall average of 16 yards on deep attempts. That's all deep attempts. So contrary, Kansas City, they got their 16+ yard average only on the deep middle, only on third down. San Francisco has a 16-yard average on all their deep attempts. Every time they throw deep, they average 16 yards. And they are 5 for 5 on deep middle passes on second down. So when they throw a deep pass down the middle on second down, they're 100%. That, again, we talk about the game plan. We talk about playing to the strength of Purdy. We talk about throwing the defense off. Snead plays in a corner. So I don't see why this necessarily would have to change. And we'll see the defensive numbers that back that up, Adam.
Yeah, definitely an interesting breakdown. And again, I think it kind of speaks to the efficiency. Like the efficiency is kind of what's jumping out to me with both these offenses and these two quarterbacks.
Yeah, they're both very efficient, but in different ways. So let's get to the running backs, because we know running backs are going to be a big thing. We already talked about how if you weren't paying attention, we let you know that Kansas City likes to go through Pacheco and rely on Mahomes. We already knew that with San Francisco. We talked about this last week. The attempts, over-expected, 8 men in the box. CMC sees a lot of 8 men in the box. That's why they run a lot of stuff to the outside. So let's get into it. The rushing attempts, no big surprise in the sense that Kansas City likes to run it, San Francisco likes to run it up the middle. The big surprise to me here was how Kansas City, they either go to the end or go to the middle. They don't go through the tackles. They hit the guard, they hit the ends, and they'll hit the center, depending on what down it is. Whereas San Francisco, they're pounding it up the middle. All right, they go pretty even everywhere else, but predominantly they go up the middle. What do you think about that, Adam?
Yeah, and part of that I think is San Francisco's offensive line. Like Shanahan does love running that inside zone running scheme for sure. But it's also the offensive line of San Francisco, as opposed to more the stretch running, creative type of style of the Chiefs, trying to get their backs on the perimeter and force some of the other defensive backs to make the tackles instead of the linebackers.
And let's face it, Pacheco's fast. He's a fast little guy, so he can get around those ends and hit them corners, a lot faster than some of the other guys in the NFL. I'd say CMC obviously can do it as well. So can Deebo Samuel.
And a lot of the Pacheco runs seem to come out of the shotgun, too.
Yes.
Like a lot of times Mahomes lines up in that shotgun. The Chiefs love that running play where, Pacheco's half a step behind Mahomes off to his right in the shotgun, and they kind of hand it off to him. And it's a zone play. He's kind of picking his hole. He doesn't have a designed hole to go through. It's that outside zone where they get a couple people pulling. He waits to see where the lane opens up, and he hits it hard.
Absolutely. I was looking here to see if I had the number, because I know I do. They do run a lot out of the shotgun. Kansas City does there. We'll pull that stat up for you as the show goes on. But rushing. So first down yardage. Kansas City's good at getting first down yardage everywhere but between the tackles. We saw that. San Francisco gets their first downs usually off the left end, the left tackle and the center. So San Francisco actually predominantly runs left, almost 2-to-1. On second down, Kansas City goes center and ends. You guys can see the chart. Third down average, left tackle. The third down average, the reason I put that there, the left tackle, Kansas City likes to go left tackle on third down because they average 15.2 yards a carry when they go left tackle on third down. Now, you can talk about matchups and stuff during the season. That does play into it. What I can tell you is no other route was above 7. They are more than double the average on any down when they run left tackle on third down. I thought that was kind of interesting, especially since they don't run a lot between the tackles. That's their least used route is between the tackles. Kansas City had their most attempts center and ends. San Francisco had their most attempts down the center, and so I took center out. Their next one was the right tackle. Most productive on the right side for Kansas City, center and left for San Francisco. So opposite things there. And I, like you said, I think that probably has something to do with Mahomes, where he's comfortable going, misdirections, things like that. And the Fox fact there, every rushing lane has a plus 4 yards or more per average, except the left end, which is funny because they use a lot. And San Francisco runs 45% of the time. They run 50% of the time on second down. It's a lot there. It could be confusing. Again, these are kind of numbers that will help you in prop bets. But I think for me, the biggest takeaway here is from a game perspective, what I'm watching is that Kansas City likes to run right. San Francisco likes to run left.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you have Trent Williams on your offensive line, I'd want to run behind him too. Like, that'd be my choice of where I'd want to run the ball also. And then, there's one more thing with the Kansas City running from shotgun. It also seems like a lot of those play calls, Mahomes gets up to the line of scrimmage. He has a pass play and a rushing play. And that's kind of why they put him in the shotgun, so he can kind of survey the defense. And he picks either the run or the pass at the line of scrimmage. And I think that plays into a lot of why they do a lot of the shotgun runs, because it's an option play that they're calling 2 plays in the huddle. Then when they get to the line, Mahomes picks which one he wants to run.
Yeah, we talk about shotguns. Kansas City runs shotgun 2-1 on their average. So in the first 15 games, I just happen to have this one point. The first 15 games, Kansas City ran shotgun 723 times. They were under center 385 times. So again, a lot more out of that shotgun. They love to run shotgun on every single down. On first down, they ran it 300 times versus 87 under center. On second down, it was 249 to 42. I mean, it's just, even on third, it's always shotgun, and it's always by a lot. And to that, their yardage is more than 3-1 from the shotgun position. Not a surprise when you run shotgun that much that your yardage is that much, but just to back up your point with the numbers, Adam.
Yeah, and again, I think it's a lot of that option stuff, and that's the maturity of Patrick Mahomes, right? Like, he's not forcing a whole bunch of balls downfield anymore. He's not trying to score a touchdown on every play anymore. He's okay getting up to the line, and if the defense is playing soft coverage and going deep and, like protecting against the pass, he'll just hand it off to Pacheco, because he knows that Pacheco's a great running back, and he has a weapon right there. And after Kelsey, that's his best offensive player.
And just to put it out there, I was reading, look, Jerick McKinnon, he's practicing. It's possible we may see some Jerick McKinnon in the Super Bowl. I don't know what kind of impact it'll have, that much time off. Obviously, Pacheco's been the workhorse, but you brought Jerick McKinnon up earlier in the show, and I should have brought it up then. McKinnon looking good.
On third down passing situations, I think that McKinnon won't, if he does play, which it sounds like he is going to play, it seems to be trending that way. He's not going to get a whole lot of snaps, because Pacheco's the workhorse there, and Pacheco is going to get probably 90% of the touches out of the backfield. But you'll see McKinnon in the game in passing situations on third downs, very specific situations for him where he's at his best, and he can be that extra safety valve where if you're going to double Kelsey and you're going to play coverage on Rashee Rice, McKinnon is the third guy that Mahomes trusts, and we've seen all season long. He doesn't trust any of the other receivers, so getting that check down he trusts could be a huge factor.
That could be a huge benefit, because Andy Reid doesn't have enough, to work with, so we need to make sure McKinnon gets in there too. Pass yards allowed, 14th and 4th. All right, you wouldn't think, we've heard all year about Snead and everything he's done. Well, look, this is the byproduct right here. When you only have so many places you could throw it in the field. And when Snead takes away an entire side, then obviously that limits where you can go. And so Kansas City comes out with the 4th best in pass yards allowed. San Francisco 14th. That, to me, could come into play in a game where against a team that goes 2-1 versus shotgun versus under center. I'm just saying. Rush yards allowed, however, San Francisco gets the edge. They are 3rd, Kansas City 18th. Because we know people are running up the middle on Jones, but we're going to see how people can get out to the ends and get away from Chris Jones, and that's kind of the case. That's what you have to do. Pass touchdowns allowed on defense, 6th and 9th. They still did not allow a lot of points. I mean, both of these are top 10. These are best, okay? They're 6th best and 9th best for touchdowns allowed. They are 7th and 5th best in rush yards allowed. Just this right here, Adam, what I see is that Kansas City is going to work to the strength of trying to pass the ball, where San Francisco is going to both teams are going to have a hard time running the ball. The edge, of course, the CMC, San Francisco has CMC, but we talk about Pacheco, you talk about these screen routes and how much both teams use them and like them and are successful with them. I suspect we're going to see a lot of that when both these teams are top 10 in rush yards allowed.
Yeah, but you know what? The 49ers weren't supposed to be able to run the ball on the Lions either, right? Like the Lions had shut everybody down all season long, best rushing D in the NFL. But the Niners just did what they did, and McCaffrey just looked like himself, like he was playing any other defense. Like, you know, there's always kind of exceptions to that. And, you know, we talk about how important matchups are all the time and this and that. And sure, like the Lions had the best rushing defense in the NFL, but they'd never played Christian McCaffrey this season. You know, when you play McCaffrey, things are a little bit different. But, you know, when it does come to McCaffrey in the last segment about the running backs, you were saying how much the 49ers like to run the ball up the middle. And they do. That's going to be an interesting factor, too, because you touched on it. Chris Jones in the middle. People do not run up the middle against the Chiefs with Chris Jones in the middle there. That's kind of the bread and butter for the 49ers. So that's going to kind of be a little chess match thing, too. How is Shanahan going to adjust his usual running scheme to give himself more favorable spots outside of Chris Jones? But that kind of takes them a little bit away from what they normally do.
Yeah, and I go back to this slide because, look, San Francisco gets the most yards running left end on first down. That's away from Chris Jones, so that plays to them. Right end on first down for Kansas City, I believe that's Chase Young's side, if I'm not mistaken. And so he's the one kind of catching a little heat right now, being the newest addition to the team. You know, he's been on a little roller coaster ride. So
wait, Chase Young still plays football? I haven't seen him in a while.
There we go. The other thing I want to talk about, takeaways. San Francisco very good on takeaways. Kansas City not so much. Which, again, Mahomes already has 4 interceptions in the playoffs. Purdy only has 1. You know how I feel about interceptions, but I think that the gap here is big enough. However, points allowed, both of them are 2nd and 3rd. Does that mean low-scoring Super Bowl? It could. I don't know.
I mean, I do think it's going to be a low-scoring Super Bowl. And, you know, one of the things that we touched on last week, too, and I'm not sure if, you know, we're getting to this again a little bit later on, is that eye-popping second-half scoring stat when it's come to the Chiefs all season long. 18 of their 20 games this year have gone under in the second half. They've been blanking opponents in the second half, and they haven't scored a whole lot themselves in the second half. Most of these Chiefs games all season long are kind of determined by halftime because their games, there's basically no scoring in the second half.
Kansas City does not score in the fourth. They're by far and away, they score the least amount of points in the fourth quarter. And they still came out at 11 and 5, 11 6, whatever it is. I mean, you know, you stop a team from scoring in the fourth quarter and you still can't win the game. I mean, that just tells you something right there. And to your point, there you go. Most points allowed by the Kansas City defense is 2nd and 4th. And remember, San Francisco scores the most points in the 2nd and 4th quarter. Kansas City allows the most points in the 2nd and 4th quarter. San Francisco scores the most points in the 2nd and 4th quarter. Just saying. San Francisco allows the most points in the 2nd and 3rd quarter. Kansas City scores the most points in the 2nd quarter. So 2nd quarter should be full of fireworks. And then, I don't know, second half, Mahomes does pretty well in the second half. But, there you go. They saw the most passes thrown at them. Kansas City saw the most with that short right and left. Both teams, I'm sure it's probably like that for 30 to 32 NFL teams. They like the short right and short left. Deep, Middle, they had the highest average. Kansas City gave the most yards. And we talked about on the deep passes, that was San Francisco's number one, especially on first down. Where do they get the most yards? Deep middle. Where does Kansas City give up the most yards? On first and second down, it's in the deep middle. Watch for Brandon Ayuk to put on another show this week. San Francisco also does allow points, yardage up the middle deep as well. So Kansas City doesn't like to throw it that often. Most yards given on the short left and right routes. Obviously, those are the most they see. Is obviously going to be the most given. Not really a huge eye opener there. Highest percentage. They have the highest percentage short left on second down. Don't throw on Kansas City on second down. Don't throw deep middle. Do throw deep middle on San Francisco on first down. We talked about San Francisco surprising with that deep pass on the second down. Kansas City, they have a 30-yard average when they throw deep on first down. That's because, nobody usually catches the ball. People usually drop it anytime later in the game. On the first down, I guess you get that surprise element, so you get the things. Fox fact, these guys get 70%. These guys are 70% on any short route. Doesn't matter what down it is. These guys can cover it on the short down, which is interesting because that's San Francisco's strength. It's also Kansas City's defensive strength. They defend the short ball well. San Francisco throws the short ball well. Both teams do. On San Francisco's side of the ball, all short routes are 70% completion rate on first through third down, except in the middle. So it's going to be the short pass show. We talk about the score being low. We talked about playing to the strength of these quarterbacks. The deep middle is going to come. The deep routes are most likely going to come in those first and second downs, the ones that are effective. And to me, again, Kansas City giving up the most yards on the deep first and second downs, and that's exactly where San Francisco gets the most yards on their deep routes. That was kind of a big thing for me, especially when we remember the play with Ayuk that really changed the entire game last week.
Yeah, and a guy that I'm looking at, even when it comes to a lot of this, and you mentioned him already, is L'Jarius Sneed, and the way that he's shut down top receivers on opposing teams, basically with no safety help in single coverage, man coverage all season long out there on an island. I'm curious to see, is he matching up with Deebo in this game, or is he matching up with Ayuk in this game? Or is he going to kind of trade off a little bit and go back and forth? It's going to be interesting to me to see which one he goes with. My guess is actually that he's going to be on Ayuk because Ayuk is more of your traditional wide receiver. He gets kind of more of those deep intermediate crossing routes and that kind of stuff. So my guess is that Sneed's going to follow Ayuk most of the game, but that's an interesting thing I'll be watching.
It'll be interesting to see when they switch it, because I do agree that Snead's going to shadow Ayuk most of the game, but it's when he's not. When do they decide this one's going to Deebo and I need Snead over there? And I'm going to look for a lot of things where they don't have Chris Jones just clogging up the middle, where they're expecting Deebo to go outside, and so they bust Chris Jones out to the outside. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be fun to watch, and I can't wait to do it. The rushing versus the passing on first down. Kansas City saw a lot of right end, right guard. San Francisco, you see there. I'm not going to go through all of them because they're not all that exciting. Look, San Francisco's great in the center. Both of them like to go center, especially on third down. The most yards given by the defense are on the ends, though. And we'll go back. If you'll remember, Kansas City's weakness is on the ends. The most yards that San Francisco got was on the ends. And you see that with San Francisco. The difference here is that San Francisco gave up the most yards on the left end, and we talked about Kansas City likes to run it to the right. They have the most success on the right. So whereas Kansas City and San Francisco, Kansas City's kind of playing into what San Francisco's good at. It's the opposite on the San Francisco defensive side. Highest averages, again, Kansas City gives up the highest averages on the right side, but San Francisco likes to run left, and San Francisco has the highest averages on both the ends. Kansas City likes to run right, and we see kind of the same numbers on the Fox facts. But again, to me, the takeaway here San Francisco, really good. They like to run left. They're really good on running the ends. Kansas City's weakness. Kansas City likes to run it right, and that's exactly where San Francisco's good at defending. Adam.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of interesting matchups there for sure. I see a lot of dink and dunk, right, in this
Mm-hmm.
game offensively. We're going to see a lot of that short stuff. We're going to see a lot of running the ball. I do like the under in this game. I think it's a slower paced game. Super Bowls, we often see that the first quarters are very slow paced as teams kind of get the jitters out. A lot of times that can go all the way through, the second quarter as well. And then with those numbers we've been talking about with the Chiefs in the second half and a lot of these matchups that we've been pointing to here, I do think that this is going to be a low scoring Super Bowl.
You get the big plays, like the break play. Someone messed up, someone missed an assignment in the first quarter. You get that big, exciting play where then the second quarter you start to get more sustained drives. You get the bigger drives. I don't know if you disagree with that, Adam, but that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah,
Uh,
I do, because it kind of plays into that jitters thing as well. Like the offenses aren't quite clicking yet, but the defenses are a little bit jumpy as well. So you're right, a missed assignment can mean a big play early, but you usually don't see teams really get into their rhythm until a little bit later in a game than you would for pretty much any other game of the season.
Absolutely. Look, big game special. That Sports Podcast Network, that Fantasy Sports Core is now That Sports Podcast Network. Go. So when you see That Sports Podcast Network pop up because you're subscribed, that's why. If you don't see it pop up, go subscribe. Super Bowl Sunday, we're going to be doing all kinds of fun stuff for you guys. We're going all morning long. We're going to take you all the way up until the network kids hop on, but we're not going to let you go all morning without talking about Super Bowl. We got all kinds of things happening for you. Super Bowl Sunday, all morning long, 9 to 12, over on That Sports Podcast Network, formerly That Fantasy Sports Core. That'll be going on. Now it's time for my favorite part of the show, The Pulse with Hulse. We're going to ask Adam Hulse 3 questions. He has no idea what's coming on, what I'm going to ask him. He's going to answer to the best of his ability, which is always absolutely awesome, and you guys get to hear it. Here we go. All right, Adam. I put that up there so people can see what's going on real quick while we talk about it. Adam, first thing that I think we're going to talk about is the coaches, because we've done it every week and we've seen a lot of big hires. The big one was the Cliff Kingsbury was supposed to go to the Raiders, then he didn't. Now he's over at Washington. Of course, we see the Dan Quinn hiring over there, which has a little personal connection to you. We don't have to do every single one because not all of them are head coaching hires, but a lot of teams are moving around coordinators as they do every season. And we're seeing people get a chance and not get a chance. And I'll let you focus where you want, but I would appreciate it if you touched on the Kingsbury Dan Quinn thing.
Well, I mean, Kingsbury being hired by the Commanders tells me one thing and one thing only, and it's that they want Caleb Williams. Like, that's all that means to me, is that they're trying to get Caleb Williams. There's already been the rumors that even if Chicago tries to draft him, he doesn't want to go to Chicago anyway, so we could see one of those, weird draft situations play out where he gets drafted, but he refuses to go to the team, kind of like Eli Manning did, with the whole Chargers Giants thing. The Commanders are sitting at pick number 2. We don't know what the Bears are going to do yet, whether, they want to draft a quarterback or stick with Fields or whatever. You might even see the Commanders try to swap with the Bears and jump in front of them, not necessarily to make sure that they don't take Caleb Williams, but to make sure that they don't trade that pick to somebody else that might take Caleb Williams, such as the Patriots or the Falcons or someone like that who may need a quarterback. But again, that Kingsbury hire, all that means to me is Caleb Williams, because obviously they've been working together at USC and they're trying to make themselves a more attractive destination, apparently, than Chicago, because if the rumors are true, he doesn't want to go there.
How about Dan Quinn?
I mean, I wasn't, a big fan of them choosing Dan Quinn as their next head coach. I mean, I get it to a point, but it kind of doesn't make sense to another point. I mean, this is a rebuilding team here. And not that Dan Quinn's old, but he's a veteran head coach. He's a retread head coach. And is it really all that much different than when they hired Rivera? Like, aren't they kind of doing the same thing and going along the same line of when they went Ron Rivera? I expected the Commanders more so to go with one of the young up and comers, first time head coaches, coordinator turned head coach. And look, maybe all those rumors were true that they were banking on Ben Johnson and they thought Ben Johnson was their guy. And maybe he really threw them off and surprised them when he said he's going back to Detroit. We don't know if that's true or not. The
Yeah.
Commanders never said that. And they never would say that. Like, look, we wanted Ben Johnson and we're settling for Dan Quinn. You can't say that as a franchise. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. Maybe they were looking at veteran guys the whole time. And the media just decided that, well, Ben Johnson has to be a head coach and this is the only job left. So I guess Ben Johnson's going there. We don't know who created that rumor. Was it the Commanders?
Who
Was it Ben
knows?
Johnson's people? Was it just the sports talk guys guessing? We'll never
Yeah.
know. Now, I thought if Dan Quinn was going to get a head coaching job, I thought really the only place that would be Seattle, just because of his connections there with the whole Legion of Boom thing and, like all that kind of stuff. But it was kind of surprising to me that the Commanders went that route when this is going to be a rebuilding team. I thought they'd go, rookie quarterback, rookie head coach, new ownerships in there right now.
I haven't seen that work too well.
Look, like, let's start from ground zero and try to build something here. But instead, they're going with the retread.
Seattle now has the youngest coach in the league. They had to extend Geno. Well, I don't know if they had to, but they extended Geno. While doing it, did they do the right thing? And I know we'll have to wait and see, but I mean, NFL writer Adam Hulse, 4 Sports Keto, what do you think about it?
Well, I mean, if you've been listening to this show over the whole time that we've been doing it, you know that I'm not a Geno guy at all. I think that, his great season in 2022 was phenomenal. He was a top 10 quarterback that year. It was excellent. But to me, that was a fluke. It was an outlier. It was a flash in the pan type of situation. I never thought it was sustainable. There's a reason why he's been a backup for so many years during his career, because that's what he is. And he's a fine, stopgap type of quarterback, in my opinion. And I think he could be one of those guys like your Minshew's, like your Jameis Winston's, that he's a backup quarterback, but he's one of the best backups in the NFL. And if you ever need him to step in and win a few games, he can do so. But he's not the guy that you're building your franchise around. Them extending him, I guess it makes sense just because they don't know what else is going to be out there. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're sticking with him again going forward. They're not giving him a big contract. They're not giving him a lot of money. They could very well still be in the market for a quarterback.
I mean, they could. I don't know. I mean, you're right. It wasn't like a ridiculous amount of money. I thought that too. Like, okay, yeah, they paid him. They want to keep him, but that doesn't necessarily mean like he's not still going to have to fight for his job. But that's all right.
They're targeting, a quarterback in the draft that they don't want to start right away.
Exactly, which is the smart way to do it.
In the second or third round that they're looking at as a potential, later draft pick that they want to bring in the developmental project, and they are planning on starting Geno this year while grooming a quarterback while they have that veteran to lean on for now, because you do see teams do that as well.
Absolutely. The third question, Adam, is this right here. This is where we stand. It is the question. It's the question that everybody's getting asked. They're going to get asked 100 times. We're going to see it over and over and over. It's time for us to answer it. This is the Super Bowl. This is how it's set up. I did not mean to put like one font bigger than the other or anything like that. There's no, collusion or any hidden message here. But it's time to decide, Adam. Who are you taking in the Super Bowl?
Look, I think these are two good teams. We talked about how these are two very balanced teams. They can both run the ball well. They both can play great defense. But defense, that's the thing. I think that the Chiefs are actually the much better defensive team than the 49ers. There's always a lot of talk about the 49ers defense. And I wouldn't have made that same statement, the first half of this season and for most of this season. But the later part of the regular season and the playoffs, the 49ers defense has not looked good. They have looked out of sorts. They've been giving up yards. They've been giving up points. The Chiefs, on the other hand, have stayed steady and solid all year long. And I think that can be the difference. That if the Chiefs play better defense than the 49ers, like I expect them to, And they obviously have the better quarterback. Though Purdy may have had better statistics this year, he's not the better quarterback. He's definitely not the more experienced quarterback. Mahomes has been here, done that. And look, all the stuff I'm seeing from Super Bowl week from Chiefs players, they are once again fully embracing this underdog role. They're
Mm-hmm.
all well aware that they've been made the betting underdogs, and they're all talking about it. They're all mentioning it. They're saying it in their press conferences, their interviews about them being underdogs. How do you think Mahomes feels about that? Look at his record in his career as an underdog. It's unbelievable. He's like 9-2 straight up without the spread as
That's
an
pretty
underdog.
ridiculous.
So look, for me, a better defense, a better quarterback. I got the Chiefs winning.
Look, you know how I feel about the whole thing. I am an offense wins games, defense wins championship type of guy. So I think whoever plays better defense is going to be the team that wins this game. And just like you said, look, they let Love throw 194 yards. They let Aaron Jones go over 100 yards on the ground. Detroit got over 400 yards throughout the game. I think Goff had like 200 and there it is, 273. And it's not that Kansas City hasn't been giving up yards. They have, but they don't give them up when it matters. They've been able to, they've had one score in the fourth quarter over the last two games, I think. And that's between Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. I want CMC to get a ring. I really do. I think he deserves it. I like to see the best players get rewarded for their efforts. I hate to see a guy like Barry Sanders out there with no ring. I hate to see a lot of these, just first ballot Hall of Famers that have no hardware on their fingers. And I don't want CMC to be that guy. I would love to see CMC win the Super Bowl, but I mean, you brought it up. You brought everything up for all the right reasons. Kansas City has proven that they have a better defense. Now they may not be able to score in the fourth quarter, and so they're going to have to change that. But San Francisco's offense, we can talk about offenses all day, and we can compare them, and I can throw numbers up, and I can obviously make an argument with you with the stats, and I think I have over the past couple of weeks about how both teams have strengths. But when it comes down to it, CMC is the non-question mark for San Francisco. And Kansas City's definitely going to have to deal with him, but he can't do it all on his own. Kansas City has Snead, who's been able to absolutely shut people down. Chris Jones said it himself, it's the defense that has been keeping them in these games that has helped them get these wins, and they are absolutely fine with that. The offense is fine with that. Mahomes, yes, has had to do everything by himself, seemingly, even though he's had help from Pacheco, he's had help from Rice, and of course in the playoffs he's had help from Kelsey, and he will continue to have help from Kelsey. The fact of the matter is, everybody was surprised at the low level of numbers, performance stats from Kelsey. He's back. This is the Super Bowl. And if there has been one running theme that we have heard for the past couple years about the Kansas City Chiefs, is that you cannot stop Mahomes and Kelsey when they get dialed in and they're just out there playing street ball. We brought this up before the season. We were talking about the game. There's no game plan. You can game plan for CMC, and he has the ability to blow it up. There's no game plan for what Mahomes and Kelsey do because they don't play anything traditional. They are out there playing street ball. They're a couple of kids. Just go out there. I'll find you. I'll toss it to you underhanded behind my back. I'll do no look pass. You don't worry about it. I know you're going to catch it, so I'm going to get you the ball, and people just can't stop them. San Francisco has shown the weakness. Andy Reid is one of the best to ever play. Shanahan has proven that he can choke, and that's not to say he's going to choke this time. I think we're going to have a great game. I do think it is going to be fairly low scoring, but in the end, it's going to be Mahomes and Kelsey standing on the podium once again. I know nobody wants to see it. I know half the people out there don't want to hear it. I know people are tired of Kansas City and they want them to lose just because they've won. But at the end of the day, they're the better team. They're the better team on the defensive side of the ball, and Mahomes is the greatest quarterback on the planet. It's just how it is. Facebook user said, how about those Chiefs? How about those Chiefs? Thank you. I'm sorry I can't see your name. Kansas City flipped the proverbial switch during the playoffs, and they absolutely have, and that's why you're going to see Kansas City sitting on top. So I'd say the majority of the time we agree. When we don't, you're usually right, Adam. But here we are at the end of the day. And, people want to make the argument for San Francisco, but I think what you and I combined together have said, it makes it real hard to make an argument for San Francisco, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look, like between what we said, like it makes sense with the Chiefs, and you can still make the case for San Francisco. Their
Sure,
offense has
absolutely.
been way better than the Chiefs' offense all season long, right? You can argue that they have a better passing game and a better running game, and there's a lot of numbers that would back that up.
But fewest
So I
passes
guess
thrown, though.
that's probably your best case, for the 49ers. But to me, like when it gets to this point in the season, when it gets to championship games, when it gets to Super Bowls, when it gets to these final few games, you can kind of throw the rest of the season out the window, because it's just a one game type of situation. And in that type of situation, I'm taking the quarterback who's already won multiple rings, the head coach who's already won multiple rings. And by the way, they have a better defense that's playing just as good right now as they have all season long, while the 49ers defense was playing their best football earlier in the year, in my opinion. So that's where I'm going.
Absolutely. NFL writer Adam Hulse. He writes for Sportskeeda, Sportskeeda with a K. Go type in www.sportskeeda.com/ Adam Hulse and find all his great articles. It's been a year, Adam. It has been a fantastic year. I have had nothing but a great time doing it. I guess we got to give scores, so I'm going to let you wrap up the season. But I guess we have to give our score predictions on the way out. But wrap up this season, 5 days before the NFL does it for us.
My Super Bowl score prediction.
Yeah, we got to do that, I suppose.
I'm going to go 23-17 Chiefs.
There you go. I'm going to go 27. I'm going to go. I like 24-21. I'm going to go 24-21. I'm going 24-21. Kansas City field goal at the end to break a tie that had been around since the third quarter. That's what I'm going with. Wrap up this season for us, Adam.
Well, I mean, they're going to wrap it up on Sunday. It's been another adventurous year, a lot of ups and downs. We both always love the unpredictability of the NFL, and we talk about it week to week on this show. And what makes me fall in love and stay in love with the NFL is you never really know what's going to happen, right? Like there's always surprise teams every year that go deeper than you thought they would. There's teams that let you down way much more than you thought that they would. But it's just interesting that now when it's all said and done with this season, it's the two preseason favorites that end up in the Super Bowl, in the Chiefs and the 49ers. They were the two favorites coming into the year. And all the twists and turns of this year, it felt like it was going to be one of those like strange seasons with a different Super Bowl because, there's teams like the Browns and Texans that are really good and like all this other kind of crazy stuff. And when it's all said and done, it ends up being the teams it was supposed to be.
There you go. You like to say that's why they play the game. That's what, and you can't do it. You can't do it this year because, there were twists. Aaron Rodgers goes down. We got injuries that we never thought we'd see. With Burrow out, so many starting quarterbacks out. Have we seen the end of Kirk Cousins? Have we seen the end of Kirk Cousins in Minnesota or just all together? We don't know what's going on in Atlanta. Will we get more Bijan next year? Is Geno going to be the man? Is Russ done in Denver? There are so many storylines to go through. New York Jets. That's what you get there. Miami, can they get it done? Can they put it all together? Or is this all that Miami will ever be? Can Josh Allen get over the hump that is Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes? I don't know. We're going to find out next year. I hope you guys come and join us. We will be here next year, God willing, and we will do it all again with the Adam Hulse, NFL writer at Sportskeeda. I am Chris Fox. We are on That Sports Podcast Network now. Join us on Super Bowl Sunday. It is going to be a blast. We are going to have so much fun. We've recorded some of these segments, and I'm telling you, it's just off the chain. We're going to have so much fun on Super Bowl Sunday. Make sure you join us from 9 to 12 on That Sports Podcast Network. We're going to go through the season. Adam, I hope we're going to go through the season again, right? I mean, we're going to go through the whole season game by game again and see if we can beat our 165 win record the next year.
Yeah, I mean, that was a fun experiment last year. I'm ready to do it again. Look, just because the NFL season is over, the NFL season is never really over. It's just that the games are over. The NFL season keeps going. We got something every month. You know, the NFL designed their schedule that way.
Yep.
So the off season is still eventful. There's always stuff going on, and this show isn't going anywhere.
This show continues. You will find us right here every week. We may take a week off after Super Bowl. I don't know. Me and Adam haven't talked about that. We may take a week off, but we will be here every week throughout the off season, bringing you the stories, bringing you the stats and the numbers. And look, if you want those stats hand delivered to you, the stats that'll help you win your fantasy season or help you on your show. Maybe you're a creator and you need these stats for your show. Go over to armchairathletics.com, join the Fox Force, and you'll get all that stuff sent to you straight there. Or you can just watch it, most of it right here. I save a little bit for the customers. But, we give you a lot here, a lot to work off of, and I couldn't do any of it without Adam Hulse. Adam, again, thank you so much for being here throughout the season. I'm looking forward to a great game on Saturday. Are you just watching it at the house?
Got some family, getting together, with some family. We're all going to get together, eat some food, watch some football, nothing better.
What's the food? What's the big food at your house, Adam?
Well, there's definitely going to be pizza and wings. Pizza and wings are the absolute go-tos. And then, you fill it up with all different other kinds of finger foods and appetizers and pick on this and pick on that. But there's got to be pizza. There's got to be wings. Everything else, you just fill in behind that.
We'll definitely be doing the same thing at the Fox household. It was great to see everybody. I hope you guys have a great season. Enjoy the Super Bowl. Make sure you subscribe to That Sports Podcast Network. Make sure you subscribe to That effing sports show. And make sure you go over to Armchair Athletics and join the Fox Force. And make sure you follow Adam Hulse at sportskeeda.com. Guys cranking out 20-plus articles a week of football knowledge just for you. Everybody be safe out there. Have a great Super Bowl. Let us know how your experience went. And we will see you guys in just a couple weeks. Have a great Super Bowl, everyone. Take care.